Welcome to Something to Talk About. Rick Mannon is with us, and Rick is a international 219 marathon runner, I guess would be the term. Marathoner would be the proper terminology, I guess. Turned coach and running consultant. He's a community promoter, which is actually how I mostly know him because he's always around town helping doing stuff. So this is just a conversation, as I always tell people. Good. And more specifically, this conversation is actually going to be in support of the Rotary Classic. So that's happening, I believe, in a week and a bit. So the April the 28th,
28th, yes, Sunday the 28th.
Now, you've been involved with the Rotary Classic for what, how many years?
Well, I was one of the original race directors back 36 years ago. This year's the 37th year, and there was Nick Rizzo and James Kent and Sam Johanna, Dennis Deuce and myself, and then a large committee with the Rotary Club. So
has it always been the Rotary run?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not as if you took something out prior to that?
No, they've always been involved.
Okay, I just want to make sure that this is still good. I want to make sure the level's good because we're going to have a really good chat and I want to make sure that we capture it properly. So the Rotary Classic has always been in the Brantford area. Correct. Has it always been run from that particular location as the park always been used for that?
Actually, there used to be, for anybody that's been around since the 1982 start, there used to be a half marathon that started in Boston, Ontario and ran to Brantford. And that was quite well known and actually had one of the fastest half marathon times run in Ontario at the time. And over the years, the locations of the course itself has changed a few times, but predominantly it's started and finished near or at the W. Ross Macdonald School.
Now, this is very much a kid-supported effort in that it draws on a lot of kids, obviously, but a lot of the funds go to the kids. Maybe talk to me about the fundraising side and the recipient side of that particular classic.
Well, sure. 37 years. Like I said, this has been the 37th year, and over the last 36 years, they've raised well over $1.2 million, which is just amazing in itself. The funds have always gone to youth in the community. The last bunch of years, it's been predominantly for the Lansdowne Children's Center and the Boys and Girls Club of Brantford.
Has it always been the Rotary run?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not as if you took something out prior to that?
No, they've always been involved.
Okay, I just want to make sure that this is still good. I want to make sure the level's good because we're going to have a really good chat and I want to make sure that we capture it properly. So the Rotary Classic has always been in the Brantford area. Correct. Has it always been run from that particular location as the park always been used for that?
Actually, there used to be, for anybody that's been around since the 1982 start, there used to be a half marathon that started in Boston, Ontario and ran to Brantford. And that was quite well known and actually had one of the fastest half marathon times run in Ontario at the time. And over the years, the locations of the course itself has changed a few times, but predominantly it's started and finished near or at the W. Ross Macdonald School.
Now, this is very much a kid-supported effort in that it draws on a lot of kids, obviously, but a lot of the funds go to the kids. Maybe talk to me about the fundraising side and the recipient side of that particular classic.
Well, sure. 37 years. Like I said, this has been the 37th year, and over the last 36 years, they've raised well over $1.2 million, which is just amazing in itself. The funds have always gone to youth in the community. The last bunch of years, it's been predominantly for the Lansdowne Children's Center and the Boys and Girls Club of Brantford.
So even though it's taking place at the, W.A. Ross Macdonald, did I say that?
W. Ross Macdonald School.
Yeah. See, sometimes you're perfectly on the mic, sometimes you're not. So I'm just trying to get you set up properly here. So give me 2 seconds here. Hold on. Let's do this properly. Okay, let's try that one more time. Maybe just get a bit closer to the mic there, because when you're on the mic, you're actually very clear. So I want to make sure that people can hear you properly. So you were saying in terms of the W.A. Ross Macdonald. So they're not necessarily a recipient of the charity in this particular case.
No, but the location has been there or at or near it all those 36 years, and this year again, it'll be starting and finishing near or at the school. Yeah,
and it's definitely a good promotional aspect for them because that's quite an interesting school in its own right.
It is, and to actually allow the school allowing the classic to take part there is pretty amazing that they've allowed that for all those years.
Well, it's a lot of people. And now, on average, what are we talking about here? I've seen, obviously, plenty of video, and I've been there, but...
Yeah, I think in the early years it was I'm going to say close to 3,000. The last bunch of years, it's dropped a bit, but I think they still get 1,500 or close to 2,000.
Yeah, and it's still a significant, I see them running, obviously, near my front door because they literally run right by here unless the path is changing this year. So when you think of the Rotary Classic, now that is a 10K, a 5K, and a 3 mile, correct?
Correct, a 3-mile walk.
Now, why is it like 3 miles and that's about 5K, isn't it? Like, what's the rationale there from kilometers to miles? I've always wondered that.
Well, they have the 5K and the 10K. That's traditional for most races. But because they have a lot of very young people and people walking with dogs and baby buggies, they have a walk. And they just made it into a 3-mile walk. Which is just about 180 meters shy of 5 kilometers.
Yeah, but that way you're not calling it 5 kilometers and confusing people.
And I think it allows for 2 starts and not having everybody all jumbled into one spot.
Well, and see, that's the thing. You always, start with the 10K people, I believe, right?
Yes.
And that's not necessarily the busiest of the crowd. Like the 5K run.
5K is the busiest.
Yeah. But the 10K now, Dave Levac brought this up on numerous occasions. It draws from all around the world in some cases. It's a fairly known prep, I guess, for some runners in the area.
Well, it is. The 5K is predominantly run by a lot of the students in the area. But the 10K, it does draw from more of the serious runners from around Ontario.
And now, are we talking? Has there any been from the States? Like you were talking
in past years,
yeah.
Yes. I mean, the course record for the 5, the 10, and the old half marathon are pretty fast. And we did have international athletes running here at one point or another.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, it's always fascinating to get into the history because much like everything, the attention span of what people have right now, the options that they have right now, the ability to get a group of people at an event, it is so difficult to do. So there's that natural decline in terms of people have other things to do. But from a numbers point of view, it hasn't been a horrible drop, which is, I guess, a nice thing to see, especially considering you're talking about something that requires effort.
Right, and a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And I think why the numbers haven't dropped very much, to your point, is that because it's been around 36 years, a lot of the children that are running now are children of, at the time when it started, were children. So it's their children that are now running, and it's become a family affair.
As you say, it's that cross-generational. And like I said, I've seen a lot of the team photos and stuff like that, and you always, as you say, right down to the dogs are brought over and whatnot. It's definitely a family thing. And there's, from a marketing point of view, you go to all the schools as well, I believe, getting all the various schools interested, and there's drives and prizes and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken.
The Rotary Club has done an absolutely tremendous job over the years at getting the involvement from the schools and keeping in touch with them, and it's just amazing what they do.
Well, it's also one of those things, as you say, it's a mainstay event every year. It's always in April?
Yes.
Okay, so every year in April, you have probably pre-organized periods of time where people, promote the event. They go and get their sponsors and whatnot, because a lot of these runners make their money by pledges, I believe.
Correct. A lot of them do.
And that's still a thing. Sorry, I'm not surrounded by kids or anything like that. So I remember from obviously when I was a kid. So the techniques that we used back in the day, for lack of a better term, still apply today. Here's my list of people. I'm going to give you $50 if you pull that off.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Nothing's really changed in some ways, has it?
Nothing has changed, no.
So the race itself, obviously we were talking about the 3 mile walk being, if you want to take the stroller out and just have a good day, because let's be honest, it's a gorgeous walk in a nice area. So just for the 3 mile walk, it's worth it. But the 5K, obviously, big money earner for the charity would be just by the sheer nature of the amount of people running on there.
Correct.
The 10K, we're talking what relative to the larger crowd?
I think they get maybe a couple of hundred runners.
Yeah, so it's still a decent amount of people doing a fairly, 10K is 10K.
Well, it's double the 5.
It's
right?
double the 5. Well, you were there the night, and once again, it's a story that I took a wrong turn that one time. I was supposed to do the 5K and then come over to do an MC thing for you, and I found myself doing the 10K. So yeah, it's literally twice the 5K. I can relate, especially when you don't train or plan for it. But the 10K from a, I guess, how do I want to get this? From a prep point of view, that there are, it's not just adults. Obviously, there's plenty of kids that are attempting the 10K. It's not.
There is. I would say the 10K runners predominantly are a little more serious, just because it's a little further, and because the 5K, the Rotary Club has tapped into the public schools and the separate schools. Predominantly are public school kids. That age group is, I would say, from kindergarten up to grade 8, right? And probably less experienced. So the 5K is a good distance for them as opposed to the 10K.
When you hear some of these kids attempting this for the first time, obviously they don't have a coach. This in many cases their first run. Thoughts, I guess maybe tricks that you might want to pass on to some of these kids that might be hearing this, because I figure we'll get into the more serious conversation in a bit, but the attention span of the youngins might stop right about now. So things that they may want to maybe be aware of or prep for leading up to their 5K race.
If you've ever watched the start of the 5K,
it's chaos. Yeah,
it's chaos.
It's total chaos.
And so if I was going to give any advice to any young person starting, I would say don't go out fast the first 100 meters, and it happens every day, and they all do it. So I can say it. I don't think they're going to listen, but that would be the best advice.
Yeah. To your point, if it's your first race, don't necessarily go up front because you'll trip, be trouble.
Well, and there is a safety aspect of it too. I get
there you go. The mic kicked in there.
Yeah. I do get a kick out of some parents that say, I'm going to run with my child. Well, not for the first 100 meters.
No.
That child is gone, and then they have a hard time catching up to him.
Well, like I said, I've been fortunate to watch some footage of the start of the race, and to see that mass of humanity run towards the camera is quite exciting.
It is.
It really sets the tone for the moment. So in terms of awareness, the Rotary Classic is happening. We'll talk a bit more about it later on, but let's talk about running in general, okay? And maybe going back historically in time. You are an inductee in the Brantford. Now, what is it? It's the Brantford and Area
Sports Hall of Recognition.
There you go. And that's been around. Well, it's been around since I've been here, because they built the place recently.
Yes, it's at the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center now. But I was inducted in 1987, and I think it started 3 or 4 years before that.
Yeah, because that wouldn't have been at the Gretzky Center.
No.
Where was it before? Where was all this?
I'm trying to think of the very first. It wasn't called the Gretzky Center at that point, but it was at the pool arena.
Yep.
Facility, and it was just a very small area inside of that.
So when they expanded it and did all the construction and the fixing up, it was a natural point to put that in there, because it's beautiful.
It is. To me, it's state of the art.
Yeah, as you say, you've got all the displays there, and you've got a few items on display there, if I'm not mistaken. I believe your shoes.
I've got a pair of shoes that I wore in Hong Kong when I won the marathon there, and a Canadian national singlet, and some medals from different parts of the world.
And like I said, there are some pretty big names, that both local, local in general. Yeah. But there's some big names there. How does it feel to be part of that lineup?
It's a very special time when you're inducted, because most athletes, myself included, we don't do it for that, for the fame and the glory. We do it for a lot of different reasons. But I have to admit, when you're acknowledged by your own community for something that important, it really hits home, and very heartfelt. Yeah,
I know it's one of those things where, as you say, you're not motivated by it, but it's always nice to be rewarded, at least from a recognition point of view, and the very fact that it's got the word recognition in. As opposed to Hall of Fame.
Yes,
I love that. I really do. Yeah. Now, some of the other names that are in there, just so you can throw a couple of names out there, so you can.
Oh, well, let me think. Well, how about Walter?
Yeah, there's Walter.
Do I have to say his last name?
No.
The Summerhays brothers.
Yeah. They were boxers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Gosh, I could go on. There's Leo Reese, hockey. Edith Heyman for badminton, Julie Howard swimming. You got all night. I could do this.
I know. Well, we were talking about the inductee and getting all those stories and stuff like that
Yeah.
figured out. It's definitely one of those things where all of those, you were saying you don't necessarily do it for the glory. Well, let's be honest. Most of us never get to see the glory, so you got to find another motivation for it because let's be honest, there's far more failed attempts at a marathon, let's say, than probably winning attempts.
True. So true. Yeah.
So it's great to have those wins. And I believe you got 7 international, if I've got my math right.
Yeah, I think it was 7. This was from the mid '80s now, so I got to think
Yeah,
back
I
on
know.
when it was, but I think it's 7. Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, when you think back on that young guy doing what he did,
Yeah.
does it feel like it's you?
It's funny when I retired from competitive running, it at times it just seems like a different world. I know I've got the memories and I've got pictures and all the memorabilia to remind me, but especially now that I'm coaching, that's my focus, and I probably put as much effort into it as I did at running. So some days it just feels like a different world, and especially when I see how fast marathoners are running nowadays compared to what we did and how technology has changed since the 80s when I was running as well.
Now, you're listed as what, a 219. Now, the first time I saw it, I didn't know what 219 meant, but that's what, 2 hours and 19 minutes? Is that correct? Okay. Because I was like, is that a 2-minute mile? So when you say a 219, so that was circa what, 87?
That was 1987.
So that was your personal best when we talk about personal best.
And officially it's 2:18:59.59.
Oh,
but
see,
they rounded up. So.
Yeah. Well, you're also on Twitter, and you'd only have X amount of space, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's where I got. So when you think about how fast they are now versus then, so 219 circa the 80s, let's say, was obviously a decent time. You win with it, so it can't be horrible. What would be a common, or what you would consider to be a stellar marathon speed now?
Now?
Yeah.
Well, just in comparison, when I ran my 219, the world record was 2:08.
Okay.
So about 11 minutes faster. Now the world record is 2 hours and 1 minute and a few seconds.
So that hasn't broke the 2-hour mark yet.
Not yet.
Oh, wow, but
It came very close last year.
Wow.
And so in comparison, all the times have gotten that much faster. And actually, the Canadian men's record was just broken this past fall, and it stood since 1970 or so. It's 1976 by Jerome Drayton. I'm not sure the exact year, but it stood for a lot of years, and we had a Canadian fellow just run 2:09. So
it's one of those things, technology, I tell you. 209, that just blows my mind, though. 'Cause, I was having this similar conversation when I was talking to Jordan Zokes last time. And it's like, I have a Peasley, 2-minute lap around Mosport, let's say, and he's doing it like a 120 or something stupid on 2 wheels. And I'm like, you don't really start realizing it. And like I said, I'll put it in the analogy of racing for a sec. If it's 2 seconds per corner, on a 10 corner lap, that's, it adds up. When you think about running, how much of that pacing is if I burn it too early, it won't be there at the end, and it's an exponential probably scenario, right?
It is. It's very, very important. Pacing is huge. And all you have to do is look at the top marathoners in the world and the top marathon races in the world, and the fellas that win it and the women that win it are usually running negative splits. And what that means is they go out for the first half slower than the second half. And that's how you run your best. It's been proven time and time again.
Wow. And is that just something that evolved through watching and, as you say, as a coach, you're seeing how this has evolved over time and seeing these patterns or whatnot?
It is. I mean, most of us, myself included, learn the hard way. And I was referring to the kids at the Brantford Classic earlier, how they start out really fast and then they tail off, and sometimes they end up walking or not finishing. Well, most of us early in the running career learn the same thing real fast. And after a while, you realize when you start out the first mile and you get to the first mile and you realize, why did I go so fast? Because it becomes a long race with tired legs after that. So you learn the hard way usually that running evenly is the best way.
Is it a certain degree of showmanship or just the anxiety or the energy of the start?
Initially, for young runners, it's the anxiety and
Yeah.
the excitement of the start.
Yeah. Well, it is exciting.
It
You
is.
know, both from a
It is.
spectator and being in the crowd.
Mhm.
It is an event, especially when you're doing it at something like a Boston Marathon or something that is
Right.
televised or, you know, something spectacular. It's that ability, and like I said, I'll use the racing analogy. When the helmet goes on, you flip a switch. You know, you're how you're thinking through, how you're doing stuff. You know, and I'm sure it's very similar with a runner. Now, I know most of these runners, especially the long distance one, rely not necessarily rely, but do listen to a lot of music. Does that really play into it, or is that just a way for them to you know, zone out, for lack of a better term?
It's a bit of zoning out, but it's also there's some really good music out there that gets you pumped up.
Yeah.
Right?
So part of it is everybody's got their beat. That.
Yes, and you know, I guess I'm one of those people that are against it. Unfortunately, I did try running with music at times, and yeah, there was times my favorite song would come on and my pace would pick up and I feel great, but I wasn't aware of my surroundings. So the people that I coach, I always really recommend they don't wear hearing any type of buds or any
Yep.
type of, because it's you need to be aware of your surroundings for your own safety.
No, that makes sense because you know, as you say, it's there's a mix. You can be so out of touch with where you are because
Right.
you're in that thing. But I was also thinking, the reason I brought it up is, you know, on the music side of what I do, there's always that beat, you know, and you're trying to get that beat. You know, there's something to be said about a playlist where you have an understanding of the beat and you're running to the beat. You know, like
Exactly.
is there? I don't know. Like I just thinking off the top, you hear it so much with prefabricated music these days, where it's just computer generated music that is at a particular beat that just keeps you in that pace, right? It's like the metronome thing, you know, tuck,
Yeah.
tuck, tuck, tuck. Is it a mental thing, or do you need a cue? Like, are you constantly looking at your watch to see if you're on pace, or you just get a vibe saying this is the pace that I'm running and I'm consistently at this? Because it's, to me, it's like walking in a straight line. Eventually, you'll curve because you know you'll forget what the beginning, how fast you were at the beginning, right?
Yeah. Um, part of the coaching philosophy is not only running evenly paced, but you talk about beat. I mean, the really, I would say the best runners in the world, they don't need a watch to show them their pacing while they're running. It's inherent in them. They've trained so much that they know what the pace should be. But I do understand that it does help a lot of, I would say, more beginner type of runners, just to establish what the best pace is. If you get that beat, that it's almost like your steps, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it amounts to. I coach a number of runners that rely solely on their Garmin watch that tells them exactly what their pace they're running every minute. The problem, of course, with that is technology.
Technology fails.
And it's relying on radio signals and satellite signals, and you run into some high-rise buildings or under a bridge and you're lost. Now what do you do?
Yeah, you turn left into the water because the thing said turn left.
Yeah.
Yeah, you stop looking. But going back to being aware of your surroundings, right? It's, once again, I'll just pick up on the racing thing just because it was a recent podcast. You know what an X lap feels like, you know, pretty much.
If you do it enough.
If you do it enough.
Yes,
and,
yes.
you know, and I've been around enough racers, you can literally ask them to close their eyes and they'll do a 1 minute 13 in their brain,
Yeah.
you know, pretty much exact.
Yeah.
It's so the knowing, as you say, and this is the practice and you know, because you'll typically do 15 kilometers to prep for a 10. Is it applied to this, or is it one of
Well-
those things where you just know this is a 10 and I'm like at Muay Thai, you'd overtrain. You do X
Yeah.
amount more, you know.
Well, I always believed that if whatever distance you can do in training, you can double that and finish a race. Doesn't mean you'll run at the pace you want, but you'll be able to finish it.
Yep.
But
Yeah, that applied to my 10K.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah, there you go. But the more mileage you run, for example, a marathon,
Yeah.
which is 26.2 or 42.2 kilometers. A lot of the serious runners that I coach, I'll have them doing 40, 42, 45 kilometer runs, solid, steady runs. And the more they can do in training, it not only gives them the confidence that they know they can do the distance, but it trains their body to be able to go through the process of burning energy and how to handle that.
Well, see, that's the other thing too. Is it's not just your own personal endurance. Your metabolism is going through a lot of stuff. I'm assuming during those 42 kilometers.
Well, it sure is. And the days when I used to run where we were lucky to have water on the course for a full 26 miles, now there's gels and you have to take them at certain increments and just to keep your energy levels and your glycogen levels up. And of course, hydration is important too. Everything is important to be done at the proper and adequate intervals, and that's how you get your optimum performance.
Well, when you're on the international circuit, as an example, you're going to different climates as well. How do you acclimatize for that? Because I'm sure running in humidity versus running in no air or variations thereof affect you.
Right. Well, I'll give you a story. I ran for Canada, the national team at the Pan Pacific Marathon Championships in Long Beach, California. I think this was 1988 or 89. And knowing that it would be warm, it was in April. So I thought, well, I'm training through the Canadian winter, knowing that it potentially could be really warm in California. Didn't know how warm. I wore double sweats all winter and extra clothing just basically run as if I was hotter and trying to acclimatize myself. When we got to Long Beach, it was around 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I thought, well, I'm trained for that. I'm okay with that. Woke up in the morning and a desert wind, a wind from the desert had blown the heat in, and it was 105 degrees.
Well, it's a dry heat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but it was dry or not. It was hot. You cannot acclimatize for 105.
No, we were doing a 3-hour race in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I was in full race attire, full race suit and balaclava and all that, and it's like, you're just sweating. You're just sweating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it climate, and the same, I guess, would also apply. Rain all of a sudden shows up. Like, it's, I'm sure, you can have scenarios where it's raining on one part of the course and quite sunny in the other, much like any other thing that has that amount of space. Now, 42 kilometers, and I love the number 42, so I'll just average it down. That's not lapping or anything. It's actually a 42 kilometers full circuit, or are they reusing part of the track typically in those scenarios?
It depends.
Okay.
Believe it or not, there are full marathons, 42.2 kilometer races on small circuits and tracks. But they wouldn't be record eligible or I call it IAAF
certified or approved,
certified, right.
Yeah.
So you couldn't set a world record on them. The courses that are approved for world records and national team eligibility are circuit or loop courses. And there's certain criteria. They can't have too much elevation drop through the course, and it has to start and finish within a certain distance of each other. And if it doesn't, then you could have a point-to-point race. In other words, starting at point A and running a straight line with the wind all downhill, running your fastest time ever, but it wouldn't be eligible for records.
Yeah, no, and as you say, you get wind on your back. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's now you brought up elevation because I know some tracks, and I'll say tracks or some layouts or whatnot, typically have a nasty surprise near the end, and a lot of it is elevation related. Is that like golf, where we're just going to throw, sand pits where are they doing that on purpose when they design that?
Not really, but
because it seems a bit harsh.
Well, you look at the Boston Marathon. It's been around for so many years and a huge piece of history. And they have what's the Newton Hills or the Heartbreak Hills, and it hits you at the worst possible time. They say in a marathon the race doesn't really begin until 20 miles, and that's around where the Newton Hills start. And there is a series of hills that are huge, including the Heartbreak, which is the worst one at the end.
Does that make, because like I said, and I'll refer back to tracks, there are certain tracks where, you'll have something like that and it makes it an iconic. Is that Rolling Hill? Obviously, stories have been told about the Heartbreaks that they named the final hill, though, for a reason, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the very first time I ran the Boston Marathon was 1979, and it was only my second marathon. At that time, you had to run a qualifying time to get into it of 2 hours and 50 minutes, which I did my first time out. And everybody said, well, you got to go to Boston. Well, I went to Boston. I was pretty naive. I didn't know anything about marathons at that time. I hadn't really studied the course. I really didn't have a need for it because I was so green and new at marathoning. And I have to be honest, the crowds were so huge, and at that time they didn't have the security they had nowadays.
Yeah.
So running through the halfway point at the Wellesley College, they call it the Wellesley College Tunnel or something, the crowds came in, you could touch the crowds on each side of your hands.
And they would let you actually.
They would let that happen. Nowadays they wouldn't, of course.
No.
But there was thousands of students at the time and just cheering, and I'm telling you, my adrenaline was high the entire course. When I got to the top of what was known as Heartbreak Hill, I saw this big sign saying, "Congratulations, you conquered Heartbreak Hill." And I said, "What, that was it?" I was so high the entire race from adrenaline.
From adrenaline and just the crowd energy and whatnot.
Yeah.
And once again, just to pick up on that, crowd energy, that is such a motivator.
Oh, it is.
When you're going into a heart thing and you've
Yeah.
got 500 whatever people cheering you on to keep on going, that you got, I know you dig deep when you're, what is it they say, the loneliness of the long distance runner, just calling an Iron Maiden song
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
but honestly, a lot of those moments, you are surrounded by people cheering you on.
Especially the larger international races. And, you look at the Brantford Classic, too. By the time...
Parents and
Yeah,
everything.
there's, I don't know how many thousands of people at the end.
Yeah.
And you feel the same energy there.
Yeah.
Once you're finishing.
It definitely is a feeling, as you say, when you've got, you've put yourself through your own personal hell, for lack of a better term, and you're emerging victorious. And, you might be walking near the end or a bit bruised or whatnot, but you made the thing.
Yeah.
To have those people handing out the trophy or handing out the
medals
or whatever, or just acknowledging the fact that you crossed the line. It's got to be spectacular to do that, in front of a very large crowd.
Yeah.
So as you say, you would not have been prepared for the crowd impact, I would suspect.
No, and that's what makes a race like the Boston Marathon so special.
Yeah.
Is those crowds and the history behind it. And it's for most marathoners, it's their dream to qualify and run Boston, and to be able to do that and finish is, I say it's a memory for a lifetime.
Yeah, no, it's also one of those things where, how do I want to say this without bringing up too much? Given what happened a few years back, I remember we brought up Boston, Ontario at the beginning. I believe that there was something done in support of the Boston Marathon. Maybe remind me of that, because I remember fine points of it, but I would love your insights on it.
Yeah, it was because of the bombing, right, and at the Boston Marathon and the lives that were lost. We decided, it was Randy Pappel and a few others decided to have a tribute run in Boston, Ontario. So it was just our way of kind of memorializing the people that passed away and the fact that we cannot live in fear, right? That didn't stop Boston. It's not going to stop Boston ever again, and it's not going to stop people from participating in things they love to do.
Yeah. No, it's the one, I joke about this, but it's the one thing that the Bostonians and New Yorkers have in common. They got hit by something hard and they kept on living.
Right.
You know what I mean? They just kept on living. And as much as those two communities hate each other for certain reasons, they share something on that front. Yeah. So when we talk about the marathon circuit, and once again, this is an international, there's various competition levels and staging grounds, and you got to qualify and whatnot. Walk me through, for someone that is getting into marathoning, and they can do the actual run, but there's logistics and stuff like that. Maybe walk me through the life of a marathoner on game day, for lack of a better term.
Are you talking about like an international to get to that level?
Yeah,
or
like
just...
the build up to it in terms of, and then, once you're at that point, I know in certain cases, we were talking about you need to get a certain number to be able to qualify for, let's say, the marathon. So
Right.
there's certain aspects of building your credibility, for lack of a better term, building your practice, your ability to do it. And as someone that has obviously done it, walk me through it. so that if someone's listening to this for the first time, they maybe go, oh, and I've got a better chance of not freaking out the first day.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Or falling and hurting or whatever,
well, that's going to happen
That's going to happen at some point.
like any other sport, right? But no, I think the main thing is everybody should have a goal, whether that's to make the Olympics or just to run your first race or to finish your first race. Everybody has a different goal, and the kind of the process to that starts out the same. You know, it's I always say it's advisable to get a coach, but you don't need a coach. There's lots of online programs that are pretty good out there too. But having your own personal coach to help you get to different levels is truly invaluable, I think. And you know, and something like a marathon is not something you can just plan for in a few weeks, right? It'll take years to build up typically, and to be a good marathoner takes some years to do that. Quite a few runners, when they'll start out, they'll start with a 5K, finish some 5Ks, and then they'll say, well, maybe I'll do a 10K. And then they do a couple of 10Ks. Well, maybe I'll try a half marathon.
So a half marathon was what, 20K, or is it?
It's 21.1 kilometers.
There you go. Okay.
And you know, once they do that, then they might get the marathon bug and think, man, maybe I can do a full marathon. Well, you know, after that, then the possibility is, do I want to see how good I can be?
On a
and
global stage.
And how far I can go, or maybe then they decide I want to do an ultra marathon. Well, you can do 100-milers, you could do multi-day events.
So okay, and that brings up this is where stuff like, you know, the death races and stuff like that probably start getting into that type of niche or whatnot. So there are 100-milers
and longer than that.
Longer than that.
Yes.
Because like I said, I know from the military stuff,
Yeah.
you know, they quite often will do these type of events,
Yeah.
you know, as part of global competitions through the different forces or whatnot. But, you know, it's funny. I always thought when I thought of a marathoner, the next step after that would be the Ironman. You know, you're doing this plus this plus this. It never really occurred to me, and this is me being naive, that there's something more than 40? You know
Yes,
what
there
I
is.
mean? Wow.
This
How do
guy's
you pace yourself on something like that? That's
Well,
just,
it is
like we're talking Forrest Gump, run Forrest.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Exactly. That's a perfect example. There's 6-day events. There's longer events than that. I coach a number of runners that are actually, that's all they do is ultra marathons, anywhere from 100-milers to 50-milers to 80K races, and a lot of them are on trails. But I find that is a different culture than going to a serious, let's say, a serious road race. I find the ultra trail runners are a little, maybe laid back isn't the right word for it. There's obviously very serious trail runners too, but I would say the average ultra marathoner that runs trails, they are very supportive of each other, a little less competitive against each other. They're still competitive for themselves, but everybody just wants to see everybody finish. And a lot of people are helping each other.
And I think, and this is kind of when I was thinking about it, using racing, it'd be the drafting, you know, where people are running in group is there that certain degree of collaboration that during certain stints or whatnot, you know, banding up together, at least maybe from a motivational, gets us through this bit? Is that the type of collaboration that you're kind of hinting at, or?
Well, that you'll even find that in shorter races too.
Yeah.
A lot of runners will work together, and because you mentioned drafting,
Yeah.
you can draft in running too.
That still blows
right?
my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wind is wind.
It's not only that, but it's been proven that if you're following an individual or group, you might get some wind drafting, but it's also, you don't think about anything. You're just thinking about one thing, and that's staying with the person in front of you.
It's that visual. It's
Right.
there.
And it's that simple. Versus if you're out in front leading or running all by yourself, you have to think about where should I be running? Am I taking the shortest course, the tangents, kind of tangents on the road? Is there tracks coming up that I gotta watch for? Just more things to think about.
Well, as you say, it's not one of those things where just because you're up front, you know, you are the trail breaker, or you know, for lack of a better term. I've always loved cross country over concrete. Just the ability to be one with nature, and you know, you also got to be aware of the roots and stuff like that are going to trip you and hurt you. But I've never been more alive, and this is when I would run. My feet just can't handle it anymore. But when I would, the trails, and you know where I live, you know where the trails are relative to here. those trails are just gorgeous running through there. You know, you just, the trees are flowing by you. It's just
Yeah.
beautiful. And then the Grand River's there. Boom, you know.
Yeah, I really do believe that we have some of the best trails around Canada
Oh,
in this area.
I totally agree. It's when I first moved here. One of the first photos I ever took was a picture of me putting my feet on the grass in the backyard. Because for years I'd be living in the concrete jungle of Toronto, right? That's the
Yeah.
concept of, and then to just walk, 5 minutes from here and have all of nature right
Sure.
there. Like there's deer right there, you
Yep.
know. It's spectacular running through that. It scared me a couple of times. I swear I've come across a bear or two, or at
Well,
least something got shuffled and scared me. You know,
Well, and the fact that back to the ultra marathon,
Yeah.
you can run from Brantford to Hamilton or to
Yeah.
Port Dover or to Cambridge
Oh,
or you name it. Right?
well, like I said, I mostly do it using bikes now because
Yeah.
it's not as harsh on the
Sure.
feet.
Yeah.
It's harsh on something else, which is why I just got the dual suspension bike because I'm starting to feel my age, my friend.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the cross country. There's two aspects there, and when we say marathon in the traditional sense, that is asphalt running exclusive.
Yes, some trail runs have marathon distance as well,
Yeah.
but really the traditional marathon is on roads.
So when you think about the feet, for lack of a better term, the one part that really hurts me right now, running on dirt versus asphalt versus concrete versus whatnot, how does that play into the coaching?
Well, ideally, I always have, I suggest and recommend to the runners I coach that they have a mix of all the surfaces. It's all about adaptation. And, as a coach, you would find the word adaptation comes up a lot. Most people get hurt because of overuse or doing something too fast, too soon, or, running too much on the roads or too much on the trail. So I always think it's good to be able to experience all surfaces. So run some on the trails, which are softer. Run some on the asphalt, which is a little softer than concrete. Run some on concrete because you're going to have to at some point if you're running around the city. And run a little bit on the treadmill because there's a lot of runners on poor weather days will run inside the treadmill, and if you always run outside and then one day run on the treadmill, you're probably going to get injured.
Yeah.
So it's all about adaptation and just using different surfaces to your advantage.
Well, and like I said, your contact point is a very small part of your foot when you're doing this thing. It's not like when you're walking. There's well, I guess there's a curvature of the contact point, but you go off an inch this way, an inch this way, you'll twist an ankle, you'll hit something, and it could go wrong very quickly, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Good, yes.
And when you factor in that you're potentially running with a lot of other runners, yeah.
It doesn't take much to get tripped up or
No.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I'm feeling my age right now, just saying half of these things. Okay, let me back up a sec. So you brought up the Hong Kong International, and to me, when I read your bio and come across stuff, it's obviously one that comes up. I would love to hear what that felt like. What's the significance of the Hong Kong International? What brought you there? Why is it so successful for you?
Yeah. Well, in 1986, I was coming back from an injury, which was a stress fracture. I had a couple of stress fractures, and when you go through stress fractures, you're not sure whether you're ever going to come back to as strong as you were before. So that year, I ran the Ottawa Marathon as part of my recovery, and I surprised myself. I thought, well, I still have it. That fall, in 1986, I went to the Toronto Wang International Marathon, and I won that race. And part of the winnings of that was to choose a marathon of my choice all over the world. So there was Rotterdam, there was Hong Kong, there was London, England, and a few others.
And they would pay for the travel and the cost?
Entirely paid for, yes.
Wow, that's a nice little win.
It was.
Yeah.
So, on a whim, I just, let's go to Hong Kong. Let's choose that one. And it was to this day one of the neatest experiences ever. I mean,
now we're talking pre-internet days. For those in context here, this is not something where you could just Google up and
I could
find.
tell you some stories about that.
Yeah.
This may not be in the right chronological order.
Oh, it
but
doesn't matter.
I won the race, And because Hong Kong was 13 hours ahead of us here, I actually won the race the day before. If you get my
Yep.
understanding
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
it. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning where I was in Hong Kong, and our phone rings our hotel room, and it's Arnold Anderson, who to this day
Yeah.
is one of the you know him from the past as a CKPC sports broadcaster.
You know, it's funny. This predates me. I know who he is. Trust
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
But I've never got to meet the man.
Yeah, just a tremendous man, and he's still missed to this day.
Yeah. Oh, his name every
Yeah.
year comes up.
Yeah, and he called me, and he wanted to know all about he did an interview over the phone, like a podcast, right?
Yeah.
Only that time it was just recorded with his.
Now he was
tape recorder.
expositor at the time, right?
He was CKPC.
CKPC. That's right. That's right. Who was the expositor? No,
That
it was in
was Ted Bear, maybe.
that was it.
Yeah.
That's. See,
Yeah.
I'm getting my names a bit mixed
Yeah.
up, but yeah. So he was CKPC. So as you say,
CKPC, and he used to walk around with his little tape recorder,
Yeah.
and he would record conversations.
Yeah.
And he did that live from all the way over Hong Kong. But also, a friend back in Brantford had a friend who was living in Hong Kong, and we connected with him. And as soon as I crossed the finish line, the person in Hong Kong was on the phone telling the friend in Brantford that I'd won the race. And it was just funny because they were saying, well, how could Rick win? It's Saturday night, but
Yeah.
he won Sunday. They couldn't get their head around the fact we were 13 hours ahead.
there's a lot of people that have never left their city, county, whatever you want to call it, let alone experience the weirdness of time travel.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's time zones are very, very weird things when you do international traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's funny because I bring that up from if this had happened now
Yeah.
in the era of everything's connected or whatnot, it'd be live streamed.
Yes,
You,
exactly. Oh, yeah.
Josie be right there with the camera and,
And
people.
there's tracking. You can track an athlete.
Yeah.
You know where they are on the course all
Yeah.
the time.
Now, when you're doing something like that? Is that because you got your phone on you, or is there an actual? Is that the watch, or like
Usually the bib number
bib
has a chip in it.
Okay, and then you'll monitor that onto
Yeah.
some form of larger feed that they'll let the international market see it. Oh, yeah, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
See, I always thought that the bib thing was only for the cross finish line, but in this particular case, this is actually trackable considerably more. So this is not a similar timing bib that we're talking about. There's a little bit more to it. Okay, gotcha. Because to your point, we live in a world now where winning in Hong Kong, as an example, is no different than winning here. In the sense that
Really?
you people have the
Everybody's
same accent.
connected, right?
Everybody's connected.
Yeah.
But back then, as you say, you're there's no Google Translator. There's no geo maps telling you
No.
where to go.
No.
And all of those things go in, and you got to actually run the thing. And
Yeah.
now, you said you won it. You weren't even sure if you were going to complete the race, I think.
No, I really should not have finished the race, and I should not have won the race.
No.
And to this day, it's still a miracle how it happened. But we went over 5 or 6 days in advance, just so I could get customized to the time zone change and the food and the water.
Oh, the food alone will mess you up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah.
and honestly,
How do you train for that?
Well,
We would like you to
good
train
question.
for diarrhea for the next two
well,
days.
I honestly, I was, I'll say this over the podcast, but
Yeah.
I was constipated
Yep.
for the entire
Yeah.
week I was there.
I believe it.
And I started the race thinking, how the heck am I ever going to get through this race?
Yeah.
And the first 13 miles of the race, I was in severe pain. And I just kept hanging on to the leaders. I was not the favorite at the time. I kept hanging on to the leaders. For some reason, after halfway, I felt great. The pain went away,
Yeah.
and I ran away with the race.
So you just had a really good second wind in many
I
ways.
sure did.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny because, like I said, the human body
Yeah.
is a wonderful thing, both in terms of how it recovers. You were
Sure.
talking about
Yeah.
coming back from a fracture. The very fact that your human body is able to do that, let alone overcome and be competitive.
Yeah.
But even, like I said, we were talking about weather and temperature and whatnot. Different water will completely, when you're talking at that level, I'm sure, you notice it. It's, so the process of acclimatization and in some cases, never bringing any of, bringing your own food, for lack of a better term. But once again, this is, back in the day where we didn't have necessarily the same Cliff Bars and
Right,
the
exactly.
whatchamacallit oils and whatever that exists now that you would just throw in your bag. you arrived in Hong Kong, you were getting either British Hong Kong or real Hong Kong food.
And in many cases, I did not know what I was eating, and
No,
I didn't want to know what I was eating.
they haven't been dying off, so I don't think that it's going to kill you. But yeah, some of that stuff that you see hanging there and you know where it was just a few seconds ago, it's an experience, isn't
It
it?
really
And I'm
is,
not
yeah.
talking myself, Hong Kong. I
Yeah.
haven't been there, but
Yeah.
I've experienced enough
Yeah.
cultures. It's it's more when we say, and this is kind of what I'm getting at, is when I say the word international marathoner,
Hmm.
it's not just that you've done well in a marathon. You've done well in marathons in, like a better term, the world stage. You've experienced the world. And for someone, we brought up Walter as an
Hmm.
example. Walter has seen so much of the world, and I hope he remembers a lot of it. But, he's seen so much of the world and he's been an ambassador of it. There's something to be said about coming back to your home city, in this case, Brantford,
Hmm.
with that exposure, and whether or not it's humility, whether or not it's awareness, context, whatever word you want to put on there, it changes you.
Hmm.
And I honestly believe that those experiences probably impacted what you did in the next 20 years in this city. Would that be a fair stretch, or am I
Oh,
completely
absolutely,
okay? I'm
absolutely.
not putting words in your mouth here.
No, but I think to get to that level in any sport, you can't do it yourself. You rely on a lot of
Yep.
different people. You get some more support from a lot of friends and family and
And we're
companies
not
along the way.
not even we're talking financial support, but also all the other support
Oh
that
yeah,
goes with it.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. And so when you reach what I would say maybe is a pinnacle of your career, you tend to look back and say, I couldn't have done this without
No.
all these people. So when I came back from those successes, I wanted to help the community. I wanted to give back, and I was compelled to. And it's a good feeling to do
Mhm.
that because so many people helped me get to where I was. I wanted to repay that back. And to this day, I think that's still it's still inside of me to do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I look at this particular series that I've done, and some of the people that have been on, there's a few of them that were specifically picked because they all have that community.
Hmm.
Randy Papple,
Right.
Doug Hunt,
Yeah.
yourself. You mentioned Dennis Dews.
Hmm.
Dennis will likely be on a show at one point in time. I've already asked him. I
Yeah.
just got to get him out of the
Sure.
kitchen. But there's a group of people that I've come across in this city since being here that fit that mold,
Hmm.
and I think in many cases, well, maybe not as much Randy because I know he's been more local, but it's because they've had an exposure outside of the city limits.
Hmm.
Or maybe in Randy's case, he's just had a lot of exposure to a lot of very interesting things in
He sure
his
has.
40-year career. But they've all, including yourself, took all of that and became massive members of this community. So much so that I know that when some of you stop doing your charity work, I don't know who's taking over in many
Hmm.
cases. It's just always a challenge when you do fundraising and charity and
Right.
stuff like that.
Hmm.
Let's talk a bit about that community side because we brought up the Rotary Classic, but there's more to it than that. You're constantly promoting sports in the area.
Hmm.
What is it about the community that makes you want to actually grow it, for lack of a better term?
Well, there's a need, and that's probably the driving force. There's a lot of events and organizations and different things that happen in our community that would not happen without volunteer
Mm.
support. And if I didn't step up or if you didn't step up, who's going to step
Mm.
up? So I think you have to take a leadership role and show to people that it's important to volunteer, and the best way to do that is by doing it yourself.
Well, what's the old thing? There's no leader here. No, you can
Hmm.
be the leader.
Right.
Step up or shut up,
Right.
for lack of a better term.
Hmm.
You also, and like I said, I just want to put a shout out there. You also have an Energizer Bunny as a wife. That's
Oh
got to be
yeah,
helpful.
Josie.
I
Yeah.
cannot ignore her in this conversation. How has she played into all of this?
Well, she's been along for the ride the entire time.
Yeah, that's I was going to say.
We met in high school.
Yeah,
and
this is a high school romance.
yeah, yeah. Oh, and just coincidentally, it was our 41st wedding anniversary
Congratulations,
yesterday.
and congratulations to you.
Yeah, she really has been along for the entire ride, and she's been to most of the locations around the world that I've traveled to, and
Yeah.
and I was fortunate that she was be able to experience that with me. But she's played a huge role, and with her community mindedness as well, and the position she held at the city
Well,
of
yeah.
Brantford. She saw how important it was to have participation from volunteer groups, and how important that was, and she made a lot of contacts over the years too, that if she needed something done, she could get it done.
There are certain people in this city that if the phone rings and they say, "Hi, this is Dave," as
Yeah,
an
yeah,
example,
Dave is a good one. Yeah.
you say yes. You
Yeah.
just say yes,
Yeah.
and Josie is on that list.
Yeah.
I hate, I hate to say it. It's a positive compliment, I guess is what I'm saying. So yes, the woman behind the man is true in this case. It plays into it.
Yeah, and you know that how times change too. Right now, because I'm going in for knee surgery, which is not running related. Everybody assumes it's from all the miles of running, and I did myself, but I actually had some trauma on my knee, and I have to get some surgery. But the times change, because now I'm walking. I'm trying to stay up with Josie, who's running. So
I just want to see you and Doug Hunt with your braces side
right,
by
yeah,
side.
yeah.
There's a photo I want to get. Oh no, as you say, old age gets you. It's not necessarily the running, or as you say, you slipped and you fell and you hurt
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
No, it's important to me because when I think of a lot of the stories that I've heard, the best ones are always the ones that have someone that's got their pulse on the community, either as a giver or as someone that's involved or just someone that's aware. And as you say, with someone like Josie, she would have been exposed to hundreds and hundreds of programs, that are dependent exclusively on volunteers. That there are very few committees, for lack of a better term, in this area that are paid.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's 98% volunteer. Be grateful
is.
for the people that are there. And when you think of something like the Rotary as an example, that's hundreds and hundreds of people getting together to make that happen.
is.
And we're just, there's the facility itself, and then there's, the course and all the stuff involved. When you think of running, it's, I guess, one thing to think about the runner side, but there's a reason why, I don't know, there's got to be a reason why these people put on these events, even though they're not necessarily runners themselves. Like, what is the draw there? Like, obviously, there's a financial benefit to a lot of these things.
Yeah, but it's not so much the financial benefit for them, it's for charities.
Yeah.
I mean, every large event that I know, even the smaller ones, their driving force is a charity of some sort. So, and you have something like, I would even couldn't even guess on how many millions, for example, the Boston Marathon just raised for their charities, and just an astronomical number, I'm sure.
Well, and like I said, there's the official charities, and then there's all the individual charities that make up the, a company coming in and putting in 10 other people supporting their own charity of choice. So, and like I said, it's funny you bring that up because to me, the charity angle of a lot of these things, the Rotary, what is it? Kids Run, You Win. No, you Run, Kids Win, I believe is what it is. And I should know that by heart by now. In any case, the truth of that is, you're doing something for fun, but at the end of the day, there's your personal growth that comes out of it. You're getting a better lap or whatever. But the fact that you are motivated because you're also helping a cause. And if all of these marathons have that benefit, the ecosystem it fulfills itself.
Right.
The runners come back because they enjoyed it. They feel good about where the money's going,
Right.
And this is why you get something like the Rotary that's been around for 36 years,
Exactly.
And like I said, the numbers have changed, but compared to some of the other type of events that I've had to monitor or deal with, the numbers are great relative
They are.
to the trends, for lack
Yeah.
of a better term.
No, I agree.
It's still a very popular draw and generates money,
Yeah. And I agree, and there has been a lot of road races. That's because I can speak to that because that's my passion, right? But there's been a lot of road races over the years that don't exist any longer.
Yeah.
Their expenses just became too high, and the numbers were dropping.
Yeah, we know a few ourselves out of personal experience.
Yeah.
We won't go into
but
that.
the Classic has done a tremendous job.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up unless there's something specific you want to cover. Did I miss something?
Other than we're going to go for a run together at some point, right?
I love running, even though my feet are probably going to hurt. Like you'll notice, I do have the laces properly locked
I
up.
see that.
It's not as if I'm completely incompetent. But no, I gotta say, I want to run again.
Hmm.
It's my biggest issue is my feet never get any peace.
Hmm.
Even when I'm lying in bed, the sheets just
Hmm.
pull down on it because of my height or whatnot, right?
Right.
So I never get to heal, and I do a lot of walking. Like
Yeah.
people in the area know me because I'll typically be bumping into them because I walk a lot.
Hmm.
And part of that is because I don't like driving in Brantford, to be honest. But and it's also local; it's
Sure.
easy to walk. But my
Sure.
point being, when I was doing the heavy running, which I love to do, and I was at my best weight because
Hmm.
of it,
Hmm.
the damage that I was doing to my feet and the inability for it to recover just became exponential. Like I can't put sheets on my toes without feeling pain.
Hmm.
So imagine running.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, like the stamina is still there. Like when I go biking, I'll bike for 20 kilometers
Hmm.
and be fine. So the stamina is definitely there, and the love of the outdoors is
Sure.
definitely still there. Um, Let me wrap up again and maybe just cover a few things that we've covered in the past and maybe kind of just bundle it all together
Sure.
as its own little thing. We have the Rotary Classic that's coming up very soon. It's an April event. We
On the
won't necessarily
28th.
the
Yep.
28th in this particular case,
Hmm.
and there will be another one next year. So if you hear
Hmm.
this at a later date, take a look at the calendar, and there's likely a run in April in Brantford that you want to attend. It's been going on for 36 years.
This is the, yes, 36, and this is the 37th coming up.
And from a money point of view, we know that they've pulled in, about $1.2 million in
Right.
that time frame, which is
Hmm.
a huge amount. And once again, that number is probably less than in reality because I'm sure there's been a lot of other fundraising
No
related
doubt.
in that
Yeah.
time frame. So we're
Absolutely.
talking a very specific bank account
Hmm.
when I mention that number. But in terms of what the Rotary Classic has probably generated as a whole, I would say it's easily three times that number. But I'm just
Yeah.
pulling a number out of my butt
Sure.
right now.
Hmm.
When we think of the impact of that money, that goes to Lansdowne.
Lansdowne Children's Center and Boys and Girls Club for this year. Yeah.
Now, for those that don't know what Lansdowne represents and what the Boys Club, maybe just which focuses on which. The Boys and Club, is that more a group, a place where people come together and do stuff? Is that how that one's structured? I'm not 100%.
Well, the Boys and Girls Club is located it's down by well, what's the, by,
Near the park, if I'm
yeah,
not
I'm trying to
mistaken.
think of the name of
It's not Lions Park, is it?
it's Lions Park Track,
Right.
but it's called the Steve Brown Sports
Steve
Facility.
Brown, that's
I
it.
was
Yeah.
trying to think
Yep, yep.
yeah. So they named it after him, and unfortunately he's passed away. But there's a facility down there for the Boys and Girls Club.
Now, once again, I don't know exactly what the Boys and Girls Club is. Yeah, okay. I do know, like I said, it's one of those things where at the end of the day, being able to have, as you say, a cause
Hmm.
adds that extra motivator. So it's a good cause, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
It's in Brantford.
Hmm.
There's a 10K, a 5K, and a 3 mile walk, if I
Right.
recall correctly,
That's right.
and that means you have really no excuse because it's a nice, comfortable walk surrounded by people that are doing a good
And
thing.
you can take your dog,
You could
or you can
Yeah.
take your baby in a buggy and and
And
just
if you're
go.
David Prang, you'll be running the buggy while running.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
there's always
exactly.
a few people who've
It's
done that.
it's fun watching
Yeah,
those ones. It's definitely a family event.
it
And
is. Yeah, yeah.
it's the sheer amount of buzz that's going on
Hmm.
at that event is huge. So we're hoping that anybody that is enjoying these stories with Rick will support the Rotary Classes. I guess is what I'm getting at. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, the Rotary Classic is in about a week and a half, but that does not necessarily mean that you're excused from not supporting the year after that, and so forth. There's 101 ways of doing this. You want to add something there, Rick?
No, I guess I just want to maybe give my little plug now
Go for
for
it.
the classic.
Yeah.
It's over the years. There's been thousands and thousands, literally thousands and thousands that have participated, and thousands of hours and volunteers that have gone into making this race sustainable and successful the way it is. And I just would hope that and encourage everybody around this area to come out and, if not participate, come out, spectate, and cheer on the other runners and walkers that and maybe offer a pledge.
Mhm. As you say, you don't necessarily have to run to be able to make a difference.
Exactly.
It is all going to a good cause. And as we were saying earlier, you run or watch, the kids win.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, I love this.